Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I'm Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 222. 222 shows. Yay! So, today here in episode 222, we have a program that's part of our Self-Employment Ecstasy series. And of course, our Self-Employment Ecstasy series is our series dedicated to those who have elected to engage in self-employment. And there's a lot of data that shows us people who are self-employed tend to have higher feelings of autonomy. Often they have higher feelings that are positive related to their work. And so we take that data and we just use the term ecstasy to clarify that there is a enhanced emotional response for many people that are self-employed. So again, this is a series for people who are self-employed, and we are looking at the world through their eyes and dealing with some of the challenges that they face, and of course, working together to provide solutions to help them surpass their goals. Our show topic today is do not hire people to help them. Do not hire people to help them. And then again, this series, our Self-Employment Ecstasy series, is of course focused on our population of community members who are in self-employment ecstasy and their novel challenges in life. And so this topic is one I personally relate to. And as I was preparing and looking through the show notes and getting ready for this program, I just kept thinking, wow, do I really want to do this topic? It does hit a little close to home. And so let's dive in. I do want to mention, as I often note, I ask that you drop by CourtneyAnderson.com. That's our main central website, and we have literally over 600 pages of content on the website. So we've got individual microsites that are part of our CourtneyAnderson.com general domain for each show. So you can come on by the site just for episode 222. We also have the companion show to this, which is our video program. And we have articles. We've got our blog. I am on Twitter at Zealous Business. And we are launching. We've been beta testing, and we're going to be launching a series of workshops and webinars. And I really do encourage you, as you come to our site and bookmark it and keep coming back for the different types of solutions that you may need, that you explore those opportunities to engage in different ways beyond just our podcast. So, what's going on with this show? Where I said it struck me, it struck a nerve in me, and I thought, this is going to be it's going to feel a little personal on this topic. All right. So the show topic: do not hire people to help them. What tends to happen, and I'll use some anecdotal experience of my own, as I've shared, one of my goals as a young person, as a kid, right, was to be an entrepreneur. And I had people in my own family, both of my grandmothers had inherited business interests from their relatives, parents and uncles. And so they both had rental houses and property and different business interests, and were really, role models for me to see that life, right? And to be exposed to all of that, and everything from their personality and how they perceived options in life, right? And a lot of that was fueled by having this experience growing up in, for both of them actually, families of entrepreneurs. So it's sort of, there's the psychological and the mental part of this, but they also had sort of the mundane part of it, right? Somebody's got to go around to the rent houses and get the rent, or somebody needs to go down to uh, they had a taxi stand. One of my grandmothers, the family had owned a taxi stand, and so she would have her kids, right? Go out and do this. You got to go to this business and go buy these rent properties. And then the other grandmother had inherited a funeral home, right? So always, the phrase "we have a body," might sound for most people like a negative, but when you own a funeral home, it's a good thing. And so that phrase is sort of ingrained, because when that phrase came in, right? So, my grandmother and her sister had inherited the funeral home, and then, my uncle was the embalmer. And so when, you're doing a family event, it's like, oh, we got a body. Again, that's good news because it sounds kind of unusual, but if that's your business, then you may have to stop what you're doing, or somebody may need to run down to the business, right? And take care of that customer, but that's a good thing. So all of these were role models. And so I think that's a lot of, when I look back in my life, I think that was a lot of where I got the idea. The other part of it is, like all kids, I'm just a sponge. I'm soaking up culture. And I had a couple of early identified things I liked. I like, uh, I like music and I like language. I love reading and writing. I like to perform, and I like the idea of commerce. I like the idea of owning stuff. So this was an early goal. I think I've mentioned in other programs. I know I've mentioned in speeches, and that I found I keep my journal. Your diary, your little dear diary is, and I've actually kept journals and diaries consistently. Not every day, or sometimes there are huge gaps between entries, but I've always had one, and I've held on to this very moment right now of this program. My oldest diary goes back to somewhere, around like 9 years old. So it's kind of interesting to go back and look in those. One, you realize how much of the stuff that you were all stressed out about was nothing, right? When you go back and you read it, and you're like, that was a huge deal when I was 11. And you read it and you think, really? I was that stressed out? But it's great. The other thing is, I see in those, I'd set these same goals, right? I wanted to own my own businesses. I didn't know exactly, what type at that time, but I had this broad exposure to different types of, I knew real estate because I'd seen that on both my grandmothers, and I knew, that the idea of entrepreneurship where you own maybe a couple of little things, businesses. So this was my goal, and this is something I worked on, and this is something that, I aspired to. And we did a show on the Courtney I'm Curious series, where we talked about when I went to law school, um, when I was 20 years old, right? I'd graduated from my bachelor's degree program and started law school. That one of my goals going into law school was to own my own law firm. Like, I knew that, like I said, from when I was a little kid, I knew I wanted to own my own businesses. And by the time I was, 20 and finished undergrad and entered into my Doctor of Jurisprudence program, that was literally my goal. It wasn't a fallback plan. That was like plan, A. So all of that's to say, I've had the majority of my life, I've been thinking about and then actually doing the self-employment ecstasy community lifestyle. And so the reason that this show topic, again, it's a little close to home, is because I've had decades of wrestling with this show topic. And typically, here's kind of, as I said, my own experience anecdotally. What will happen is this. So when you are in self-employment ecstasy, one of the things that's a challenge is you're constantly thinking of ideas. And we did a show in the series, right, about I have so many ideas, right, in self-employment ecstasy. So check that program out. And part of that is because it's one of the traits that goes along with somebody who does this, because there's no one else to tell you what to do, right? So when you're not when you're employed by someone else, they're telling you what to do, right? They tell you all of it. You're going to do this. You're going to do it in this location. You're going to do it with this software. You're going to do it at this time. You're going to, these are the customers. Like, they tell it to you, and you may be able to give suggestions and collaborate on different aspects of it, but it's all set up. When you're someone who's in self-employment ecstasy, especially someone who starts something, then you have to make it all up. Literally nothing exists, right? It's just air. So what's the name of it? What kind of business is it? What kind of signs and what font? And I mean, there's just all these decisions. And so somebody who likes that is the kind of person who constantly has ideas, right? You're just, this is your thing. You're really the term now that's popular. You're a creative person. Well, yeah, you have to be by virtue of the job, because you create stuff from nothing. So anybody who creates something, or expands something, as I said, in my family, people might have inherited businesses and then they enhanced them, or in some instances expanded them. So you have to be like this. Otherwise, you wouldn't have anything to do. You'd just be sitting around somewhere thinking, I don't know what to do, because there's nobody to tell you. So you have a lot of ideas. And so what tends to have happened is somebody who has a lot of ideas and a lot of passion and enthusiasm, and most self-employment ecstasy community members struggle with this. It's like any creative endeavor, right? It's one of the reasons I use the term and the concept that we're practicing the joyful art of business, which I apply to all the things that we do, whether we're self-employed or employed by someone else, or we're a contractor, or we're doing volunteer work, or anything. Because I think whatever we do bring our own unique talents and texture to it, and I call that art. And some of us have more emphasis on the artistic part, and then some of us may have less. So we all have our own unique art that we bring to what we do. All that's to say, when you're someone that has a lot of ideas, you're often simultaneously creating ideas while troubleshooting, right? It's that, like the analogy of you're building the plane or fixing the plane while you're flying it. To some degree, you are. Because anybody that makes something or creates something or tries something that's novel, because it's novel, I don't know exactly how it's going to work. Now I'm going to do my best to use expertise and good data to make good decisions, but there's still going to be the process of unexpected things are going to come up. So even if it's a huge, well-known global conglomerate, you'll see when they roll out new products, there will be something that was unexpected. And even with immense amounts of money in research and development and testing and everything, that's just sort of life. Because it's something new. We haven't built this, or we haven't built this like this. We haven't built this type of plane with this body. We haven't built this type of smartphone. So until you do it, you don't know. So part of that is just the nature of the beast, right? And so you're creating new ideas, but you're also problem solving constantly, because there's so many decisions that have to be made, right? Just we all have this in our lives. So even if someone's not in self-employment ecstasy and they're an employee of another organization, then there's still so many decisions just in your own regular life, right? What am I going to wear? What am I going to get them up? If you have family or pets or friends or neighbors or just yourself, there's so much that you've got to decide. Okay, so you just layer more levels of decisions depending on the different types of endeavors in your life. So when you have a lot of decisions you're used to making, you're used to a lot of ideas. What tends to happen, what has happened to me anecdotally and to many other people in our self-employment ecstasy community, which is why we have the show, is somebody will be talking to someone in their personal life. So it could be a friend, it could be somebody that you met in some other social group, it could be a relative. So it's somebody in your regular life. And because people in self-employment ecstasy are in ecstasy, they tend to be really sort of pumped up and excited about things. That's the other part of the required, job. You got to have enough passion to do it and motivate yourself, because there often is no one else. Especially at the beginning of something. Like, you're the only one that's like, hey, let's do it. And you may have resistance, where people say to you, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? So you have to have a sort of an extra dose of enthusiasm and engagement, because this is where it's different from being employed for someone else. There's no other way to get it done, but you're being a catalyst. So you are fired up, and you have to have enough resilience, because if you're an entrepreneur, and anybody in business knows this, in leadership positions, you try stuff, most of it fails, or it doesn't work the way you thought. So you have to, that's why I said you're repairing the plane while you're flying it, because you're constantly trying to keep the whole idea of a viable business vehicle, right? And again, that's something that executives and managers also do within employment for external organizations. For self-employment people, there does tend to be a heightened, again, level of passion and enthusiasm and these types of really um, often viewed, positively in modern times, right? The whole idea of engagement, right? Employee engagement is a huge area for people who focus on the corporate education programs like I do. And that's because you're trying to get people to care. The challenge for many of our self-employed ecstasy members is we care, and some would argue, quote, too much. That's a whole nother show topic. But you have to, because there's no one else to make it happen. And if it's imaginary when you're starting it, if you don't have a massive amount of energy to put into this to make it real, then it doesn't even exist. So all that's to say, it's something that self-employment ecstasy members are more susceptible to when they're talking to somebody in their personal life. And again, family, friend, neighbor, somebody they knew from school, anybody that was in a social group from before. And what they'll tend to want to do is start talking about the business stuff because it's exciting to them. And this is where it's very similar to a lot of other people who are in creative endeavors. So a lot of artists are like this. If you talk to somebody who who's a sculptor, they'll want to talk about that sculpture that they're working on. They're going to get really excited about it. It's exciting for them. It's the rush of all of it, right? Here's the challenge between, though, the self-employment creative person and people who are just creative people who don't view it as a business vehicle primarily, right? So although many sculptors and writers and makeup artists also have businesses, they view it as like the art first and the business second. For people who are in self-employment ecstasy, they do see the business as either an equal, it has parity with the art, or sometimes they may even think that, oh, I'm a business person first, which is okay. People can calibrate it how they want, but they have a huge infusion of the creative, and they also do recognize it as something that they want to make into an opportunity to earn a living. And like I said, there's often overlaps in people who are, artists are the same way, but they often will talk about the art first and the business second. And sometimes they'll even do their art and then claim, oh, I'll leave the business to somebody else, which is a whole nother topic. So when you're really passionate and excited, you talk to people in your personal life about your businesses, which is not anything unusual for people in self-employment ecstasy. What that will potentially, though, open up opportunities is for someone to say something or do something to let you know they perceive or they are experiencing a situation where they have financial challenges, right? So maybe, you talk about your life and then they're talking about their life, totally normal and healthy. And then when they're talking about their life, they'll share something that relates to some financial thing, right? I wish I could have gotten that promotion or something. Maybe they're out of work, right? Maybe they're in a job, but they wish they had a better job. Maybe their job is okay, but they have a financial, a bill came up that was unexpected, and they really are just worried. How will I earn extra money to to be able to handle this? Okay, whatever it is, it's a financial thing, and this is the lure and the challenge for the self-employment ecstasy member. When you're in a situation, especially when you've done this for years. So I will never forget in my 20s, I'm doing ideas, I'm trying ideas, and they're failing. That's normal. Because again, this is not easy. We did a show, right? If it was easy, everybody would do it. Or they succeeded to a level, but they didn't succeed the level I needed them to be the going concern that was the goal, right? Okay. All that's to say, by the time I was in my mid-20s and my late 20s, then my business has started to work in terms of, hey, there's enough money from the business to pay the business bills and to pay me, right? And then in my mid-late 20s, I bought my first home. I did a show in the Courtney, I'm Curious series about that, right? Buying a house and that age range. And that was it. When that happened, it taught me in my head, so this is working, right? Because I'm able to pay the business, and then I'm able to pay myself, and I'm able to save enough and have enough financial resources that I went and I got a mortgage, right? I borrowed the majority of the money to buy my first house, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It was it. I will never forget. Because in my mind, that that was the dream. The dream was to get to the point where I could support myself and then support surpassing my goals. And one of these goals had been for, like I said, growing up, I knew the real estate thing because I'd watched all these, both of my grandmothers, and I knew how imperative it was. Like, you have to own real estate. Like, I knew that, right? But like I said, both of them at different times, rental properties. I knew all of this just growing up as a kid. So in my mind, it's sort of when the switch flipped, because you're always in that sort of disbelief to a certain degree, where you're hoping and you're watching. So you are seeing, oh, okay, well, money came in, but it's still always, like I said, a little bit of, is this really working like this? And as you start to accumulate more assets over a longer period of time, you get used to it. So it teaches you that, yeah, even though you still continue to make the majority of the decisions and ideas, they aren't successful. That's just the nature, that's your batting average. And I'm not great at sports, so it's not a great analogy, but that's just that's how life works, right? But you have enough success that teaches you then that keep doing it, right? Like that the concept of, you can create an idea, and eventually, and some of them are going to make you money. Like, there's a solution. Okay, so all that means is that when someone comes along and talks about a financial issue, and especially when they're someone that you already know, and that's mostly who it is, because rarely do strangers come and start telling you about their financial problems, although that does happen sometimes. But if it's a family or friend or somebody you grew up with, or somebody you knew from your religious or social group, or you were in middle school band together, or whatever it was, when people start talking to you that and they're telling you about financial problems, for the self-employment ecstasy member, you often think money is one of the easiest things to fix, because you've taught yourself that you come up with ideas, and you test and you try and you modify and you keep it up and you keep it up, and over time you accumulate assets. It works. Like, how to create revenue streams. Some of them may not last as long as you want, some of them may not reach, but you know how to do this. So when somebody starts talking about money, often what tends to happen in the self-employment ecstasy member's mind is, oh, this I can help you with. Because there's so many things in life we can't, right? Like, health issues. If it's some, oh my goodness, out of the blue thing, and the person was, fit as a fiddle, and wow, it's shocking. Or, there's a natural disaster, what do we do? Like, all the regular stuff in life, right? Like, there's a horrible famine somewhere on our planet, or something's happening with the environment, all the things that we all worry about, just life. I can't do anything about most of those other than share my time and try to, be of service in whatever way I can. But if somebody tells me something financial, especially if it seems small to me, so everybody has their own limit for this, right? And it's going to be calibrated based on your own life experience and sort of your own life self-employment issue. But most of the time, you're self-employed, you do know how to sort of create something to create money. That's the whole point of it. So if somebody's like, oh, if only I had a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, wow, make all the difference. And many people who are self-employed's mind, that's so simple. Like, I can't deal with all this other stuff in life, but I do know how to do this, right? And I can help. And this is where we go down this path of getting in huge potential trouble. So someone in your personal life, family or friend, or somebody you knew from when you were in 7th grade or something, says, hey, having financial trouble. Or they just say something like, oh, I'm okay, but I just, this isn't my dream. I'm not making as much money as I want to, and, whatever. So because you care about the person, you think, oh, well, this is easy. Money is the easiest thing. That's one thing I do know how to kind of do. And so it makes sense if you think about this. I'm trying to argue the side of the person who's doing this, because you think, well, I have business stuff, right? So I'll just hire them. I know them. Often I trust them and I respect them, right? They're honest. They're good people. Maybe they have a skill that's related to what some of my business is, right? I said earlier that I watched as a kid both of my grandmothers, like sending family members, hey, you got to go to the rent houses and get rent money, or, you got to, take care of this, or I'm going to go to the business and take care of customer. I kept watching that. So I saw how it can work in a really positive way, right? There are wonderful examples of people who have family or small businesses, or even large businesses, with people that they knew, and because of the trust and those bonds, it can be fantastic. It can be. And I'm going to get to this point right now. You have to hire people because of their skills, interests, and qualifications. If you get lucky enough that it's somebody that you personally know who has the same skills, the same interests and qualifications, that was their dream anyway, then it's a dream, then it works. The problem with this show title is when you're not hiring somebody who has the skills, interests, and qualifications, you're hiring them because you're trying to help. And because you know them and you think, well, this is easy, relatively speaking, right? And that's where you're setting yourself up for disaster. So it's somebody that you already knew, and you think, oh, well, they're just saying about money. They can come help me, right? And one of my businesses, that'll be fine. Uh-oh. And this is not someone who has any of the skills, interests, or qualifications, or all of them. Not any. Most people have some of them. But they don't, this wasn't their thing. It wasn't like it was their dream to do this and it was your dream to do this. And you happen to have, a candy store and they've loved candy and, studied candy in school and like they're ready for it. And that's like a perfect sort of good fortune. It just happened to work out that somebody you already knew had these same, again, qualifications and skills and interests. That does happen, but it happens rarely. What happens more often is what this show is about. You have somebody that you know and you trust them, and maybe they're a great friend or a relative, or they're fun, or whatever. Maybe you're in a romantic relationship with them, whatever. And you have a candy store. Now they have no interest in candy. Like that wasn't their thing. They weren't dreaming about that as a little kid. They didn't study it. They've never in their life thought about candy. But you happen to have the candy store. They have a financial situation. So you say, hey, I was looking for somebody to come by. I'm going to be remodeling the candy store. Can you go over there and just sort of be like a site supervisor and check out, what's going on with the renovations when I'm not able to? And I'll go ahead and hire you as that site supervisor and I'll pay you whatever. Often what the person who's making the offer will do is, what a surprise. The money either meets or exceeds what the person that they already knew, was talking about they needed or wanted. And that's intentional, right? Because the person who's self-employed thinks I'm helping. Right? And remember, the person in self-employment ecstasy, like they're super excited about this because that's sort of the nature and hallmark of any type of self-employed or entrepreneurial person. You have to be, because if you're not, you never would have made it to make money. You wouldn't have gotten this far if you weren't sort of extraordinarily fired up and passionate and tenacious enough to know when to keep going and also to know when to quit something that isn't working and pivot to something else that is working. Okay. So the person has the candy store, they're self-employed, say, hey, go be the site supervisor. You were talking about whatever money. You were saying, oh, if only you had an extra, $1,000 a month. It just so happens I'll go ahead and pay the site supervisor, $1,200 a month. Problem solved, right? No. What is the expectation of the person who's the offerer? The person who's the self-employment ecstasy member and who has the candy store in our hypothetical and says, hey, you go over there, I got a job for you, and it just so happens it'll pay what you were looking for, a little bit more. Their expectation is that they're quote helping. That's really what they think. They think they're helping. And so their expectation is that the person will be grateful. Oh, great. I needed help and you extended help. This is a win-win, right? That's what they're thinking. They're also thinking, one of the challenges that we've talked about in our shows is the toll that it can take, and that it does take in many instances when you are the one in decision-making situation. Whether you're employed for an external employer or yourself, it's lonely at the top. We did a show on that exact topic because it is. Because you have less and less people to talk to just by nature of your job, and sometimes you really crave that. Self-employed people, it's even a little bit more challenging than somebody who might be an executive of a huge organization, because at least at the executive of a huge organization has other people around them. Sometimes when you're self-employed, you literally may be the only person on your team. Now you may hire vendors and contractors to do the stuff that you either can't do or aren't able to or don't want to. But it's not exactly the same. At least you're totally surrounded by people when you're the CEO of a place and there's 400,000 employees. When you're self-employed, it may literally just be you. So part of the problem may be you talk so much to people in your personal life about this stuff because you don't have anybody else to talk to about it. You don't have a CFO, right? And so you're just happy to talk to your cousin, and you're talking to the person that you were in, little league with or whatever. And now, we're in this thing where the person who's self-employed thinks I'm helping, like this is a good thing. And the other thing is they're giving that person who they already know, they're bringing them into their world a little bit more. So it will potentially, part of this is again very selfish. They're thinking, well, that'll give me, we can talk now. I can talk to them about all this stuff. I already talk, it's already really important to me what's going on in my candy store, but now it'll be a win-win for me. It's somebody I already care about in my real life, and now I'll also get to bring them more into my candy store thing. So that makes me super happy, right? Okay. Now what happens on the other side? What's the mindset of the person who was made the offer, right? So they are talking to somebody they know in their regular life. We all do that. And happen to mention something they're dealing with. We all do that. And now their friend says, "Hey, okay, this may work. I have an opportunity, one of my, self-employment things. You'll get money. I'll get to have somebody take care of the issue I needed to have taken care of. It's a win-win." I think for the person on the other side of it, it's multifaceted. Part of me suspects that the reason the person was discussing the financial thing with the self-employed person is because they did know that that person had options, potentially. Right? Like I said, self-employed people often talk about it because it's like an exciting thing for them. Just like a person who was a painter talks about their paintings, or, a musician talks about their music. I mean, that makes sense, right? So part of it may be that at some level, even if it was sort of not something they were primarily aware of, that they might have thought, hey, that person has resources, or at least they have vehicles that give them resources, right? Their candy store or whatever. Now, they may have thought, hey, the person has resources and they can just give me the money. Or maybe they thought, hey, the person has resources, they can loan me the money. It doesn't really matter, but the thing that causes the problem is that the person who was talking about the money may have actually wanted the money, but they do not have the same shared skills, interests, and qualifications. We just talked about this. So the candy store thing isn't their thing. If it was, they would have already a long time ago been like, hey, my dream is a candy store. This would have come up earlier. It's not their thing. And because of that, even though they may have a financial situation, or they may be in a situation maybe where they don't have a financial pressure, like an unexpected bill, but maybe their job is like, it's not exciting. And then the self-employed person is often, and again, this not always, but often really excited. So they're like, oh, this is so exciting. I'm working on this and we're doing this, and they're really into it. And that sometimes can make the other person feel like, well, they're really, fired up about this. So maybe if I go over there with them to the candy store, then I'll be, more excited. The challenge though is, no, not really, because you don't have the same interest. That's not your thing. Now, we already said earlier, if it had been, then we never would have gotten a situation. Because self-employed people find and are thrilled. I mean, excited. Nothing makes somebody who's self-employed happier to find somebody else to talk shop with. And that's the same for anybody who has some passion. So if you're somebody and it's your hobby, bird watching, and you find somebody else who's into bird watching at any level, you're like happy because you can talk about the thing that makes you excited and passionate with them. And so that's just sort of universal. For the self-employed person, it's that they sort of wrapped up their hobbies and passions into this thing that also makes money. And that's a slight tweak to it. So if they can find someone to, again, talk shop with, it makes them happy. They are aware that the person in their life that they think they're helping isn't into this. They're not into the candy shop, and they're also not into being an entrepreneur, which are, the two layers of it. So whatever the underlying revenue generator is, they're not into, but they're also not into the idea of just being self-employed. If they were, they would already be doing it. We already talked about that. So where this thing falls apart is the person who made the offer. Hey, you can come over there to my site, my candy store, site supervisor, $1,200 a month, problem solved. Thinking, oh, the person will be happy and grateful, plus they'll be like more enthusiastic to talk to me about the candy store. I'll be less lonely. It'll be great because I already like them and they like me, or we're relatives, or maybe we're married, or who knows. So they'll be grateful. This is great. The person who's on the other side is not seeing it that way, because if they wanted to go work in your candy store, whatever the underlying entity is, the endeavor, or they were interested in being self-employed themselves, they would already be doing it. By doing it, I mean they have taken steps to be doing it. They'd have their own, oh, I tried my business, and that one didn't work. That would be different. See, they haven't done that. And this is where the whole thing falls apart. The person cares about the self-employed ecstasy member? That's why they're in their life, right? That's why they're their family or friend or, neighbor or person from middle school that they still talk to and have a relationship with. That they're there because they like them and they have a relationship. That's a good thing. They do not share this same passion for the business and or the underlying actual whatever the actual revenue generators. They're not into that. If they were, they'd be doing it. The fact that they're doing this other stuff means that they're not into this. And the whole thing falls apart, and I'm putting more responsibility on the self-employed ecstasy member to fix it. When the self-employment ecstasy member thinks I'm helping, you're not helping. You're hurting. And what you're hurting is the relationship. It's the best intentions, right? You think, oh, somebody's trying to give somebody something. Well, yeah, but that doesn't fix stuff. What tends to happen is this. When I have a problem, I want to learn how to fix my problem myself so that I can keep fixing things like this the rest of my life, right? Or prevent this from happening again. If I had a problem and somebody else came along and just did it for me, I would never learn myself how to actually do it. And it would leave me just as vulnerable to being in that same situation again. So that's why I want to learn how to fix it. I don't want somebody else to come do it. I need to learn it, right? It's like a little kid. If a little kid never learns how to tie their shoelaces, right, on their tennis shoes. As an aside, when I do my exercise every morning, I wear my tennis shoes, and shoelaces are just not the easiest thing to me. So anyway, as an aside, but they're effective. All right, so let's say a little kid was struggling with shoelaces, and if I'm from memory, no wonder, probably that's why I said what I said a minute ago, the shoelaces thing. It took me a while to get the shoelace thing, right? I didn't learn that as quick as other kids. But I did, and I can do it now. What if I had never learned it and some other adult had said, you know what, she tries, bless her little heart, but she never learned this. Let's just tie it for her. And they just, every single time I wore shoes with laces, they tied them for me. And then they went out and purchased me other shoes where I didn't have laces. I had like Velcro or something. And I never learned how to do it. Right? So then when something happens in the future and I don't have any other shoes and they're just lace shoes, I need to learn how to use lace shoes. I'm sitting there and I may be 60 years old and I still don't know how to do it because I never learned it. So the thing where you come in and you do it for other people, it doesn't usually give you good outcomes. Now, working and collaborating with somebody to teach them how to do it is totally different, which is what we do in our programs, right? And that's what inspires people and excites people and gives people, amazing opportunities. So in this show topic, when the self-employed ecstasy team member thinks I'm going to help them by hiring them, they're not, because this isn't their thing. And you know that because they weren't doing it. And so the self-employment ecstasy member hires the person who's their friend. The person who's their friend, maybe they do show up. Maybe they show up on time and do everything that the person asks them, but they're not, in the self-employed ecstasy team member's mind, often showing the level of gratitude that person would expect. This is where these things go wrong from that side. And the person starts to think, I don't understand this. Like I went and, made this happen. And they're just sort of like, yeah, whatever. They don't seem fired up about my business. They're not super excited about spending hours with me talking about the candy store. And you know why? Because they weren't before. Before, they were your friend. They'd listen a little bit. You'd listen to their stuff. They listen to your stuff. It was equal, right? Now you expect them to have this, immense, overflowing new life mission like you do, and they don't. They didn't before. So they resent it. They resent that you have all these expectations that they would argue are unrealistic, right? You resent that you feel like they're not grateful and that, hey, I did everything I could to help you. Like, I didn't have to do this. So then the person who's the recipient of this potential help, which it isn't, starts to feel like, hey, you're arrogant, right? You're arrogant. You think you can just, go through life and just make stuff happen, and, it's not that simple. And then there's also a tinge sometimes of, when somebody has something that they're really into and they do it well enough that they can, have some level of success, right? The people who don't have talent in that area, if they don't have their own place where they feel that they can shine in their lives, they can become resentful, right? So let's say I have a friend and they're like a super talented, athlete. They were so talented. They were so great, really wonderful, talented athlete. Maybe they do it professionally. They're beyond, super talented athlete. If I didn't have my own things in my life that brought me my joy and passion and happiness, and let's say that I woke up every day and I was like, oh, I gotta go do my work. I don't like my work. I don't like any of it. I don't like the people I live with. I don't like my body. I don't like my income. I don't like anything. I'm just unhappy. Okay. If I was in that space and then I had this friend that was so great at the athlete thing, and I don't, in my real life, I don't. That's not my area of expertise. If I had nothing that brought me some sort of commensurate level of my own feelings of pride, then it's really easy to see how I could start to resent the other person and start to say, hey, you know what? I'm really uncomfortable. All you do is throw in everybody's face this athlete thing. Well, it's easy for you, right? It's easy for you to do all this because you were doing it since you were like 5 years old and you're really tall, which just happens to work out perfectly for your sport or whatever. And I'm not. And you get to this really negative space. Now, it's not obviously related to the fact that the person's successful. Obviously, when we're with someone that's in our community of caring, we know people in our community of caring are people that we care about, and their happiness is our happiness, and our happiness is their happiness. But if I don't have my own space in my own life where I go to get my pride and my self-esteem and get really passionate and jazzed up about excitement, then I'm going to resent other people who do. And that is also part of what goes wrong with this thing about hiring people to, quote, help. You're bringing them closer to you in your world of self-employment ecstasy, thinking this will be great. They want to talk about my candy store. Let's spend time together. No, they don't want to. They didn't want to do it before. The only reason they're there, and if they are there, they're there grudgingly. And then they also feel guilty, right? So they simultaneously are like, look at you. You're so arrogant and so easy for you with this business thing, right? But it's not my thing, because if it was, I'd already be doing it. But I also simultaneously kind of, resent you. But I also feel kind of, guilty for resenting you, because I have known you, personally, and I do know you work hard, right? Like you earned this. And that you see this toxic brew, right, that's coming. And the core problem is that we all have to individually have our own self-image and definition that brings us some level of joy. So I'm not jealous or freaked out or upset or whatever, or resentful of somebody who's a super talented athlete. Or maybe they're somebody who, is a foster parent and has, 7 foster kids and is really talented, and that's like their thing. I'm not freaking out with jealousy and rage, right? Like, why not me? If I have my own thing that makes where I go to feel good about myself, and it's nowhere near the same. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that I have my place where I go feel good about myself, and then get my energy and passion and like, yeah, awesome. And then they have their thing, and they're totally unrelated. But that's the fact that we both have our things is how we are able to have a healthy relationship. So that they would then be like, oh, what's going on at your candy store? And I talk a little bit. We have to always work in self-employment ecstasy on like limiting this, because they really don't want to, hear the whole thing. And then we would say to them, what's going on with your foster kids? Or tell me more what's happening with your, professional athlete thing. They'll tell you. And again, they have to work on lowering that a little bit too, right? So it's fair. Then we'll talk about things we have in common. Hey, well, let's go to that movie we like, or let's go to that park and do that, or let's go to that, jazz concert or whatever, because we're friends, or we're family, or we're related, or we're dating, or we're married, whatever, doesn't matter. When one party doesn't have the thing where they go, their sort of reservoir of like, yeah, this is it, this is my thing, making it happen, I'm excited, I'm fired up, then you got a problem. And that's where this whole show challenge falls apart. You hire people because they have the skills, interests, and qualifications. If they happen to be somebody you're related to, married to, went to school with, a friend, great. That is very rare. Just because, the odds of all that lining up are just rare. That would be like my friend's a professional athlete, and then what a coincidence, so am I. It does happen, but it's rare. Where this goes wrong is stopping myself as a self-employment ecstasy community member and remembering at all times, they don't want it fixed. They just want my empathy. Remember, teaching them how to tie their shoe, they can do it for the rest of life. There's lots of variations on this adage, right? Teach somebody how to fish, and they fish through their life instead of just giving them a fish or whatever. But the underlying idea of people learning to have self-sufficient skills and to have the belief in themselves, right? Self-efficacy. That actually, there's a lot of data that shows it's really important. And again, often they're widely disparate areas, right? So, it's my friend that they're but like, they're just an amazing, grandparent. Or I have another friend who uh is in a completely different place, and is an executive at an organization. I have another friend who does nonprofit work. Whatever, but they're all totally different. But the thing that's the same is that they have a good sense of self, right? Like, they're like, this is my thing, all right, and then they can then relate to other people in a healthy way. It's never going to be healthy when someone feels dependent on the other person. And we did shows a while ago about financially the issue of, you always want to be able to support yourself, because the psychology and the oftentimes abuse that comes when somebody's financially dependent on somebody else. And I don't care if it's a grandparent, a spouse, a neighbor, a boss. You never want it to be like that, where somebody else is, the puppet master and pulling strings and make you do whatever they want because they perceive that you need them, and it's one thing for us to work together, it's one thing for us to collaborate, but you always want to have your own sense of self. And that's what this show's about. You don't need to hire people to, quote, help them. If you want to help and somebody has financial problems, you know what you do? You give them the money. If you don't want to give them the money for whatever reason, then don't give them the money, and then just don't talk about it. Then be empathetic and listen. Give them suggestions that meet their needs. Not come work one of my businesses. Suggestions like, oh, okay, well, so you're working in that insurance company. Is there anything else you want to do in insurance, or you think about a different kind of job? Or maybe you go back and get a different type of certification, or do you want to just work at a different insurance company? Like, listen to them so that they can work through and learn their own solution. So options are, if you're really concerned and they really have a financial need and you feel like, oh, this is so simple, let's give it to them. Well, then just give it to them. No strings attached. Never make a loan. That's a totally different show, but I had to mention it in this one because it just needed to be underscored. Don't ever loan money to people. Don't. Unless you own a bank and it's a client it's a client, so it's not a personal friend, then don't make loans. If they're your family, your friend, your neighbor, somebody you know from the dog park, I don't care, and they have a money situation and you want to help, then just give them the money. Do not ever call it a loan. It is not a loan, because that's going to create disaster or problem. And it's not worth it. If you have the money and you want to help them, give it to them. If you don't have the money and you really want to help them but you don't have it, don't give it to them. And that's why the loan thing causes problems. Somebody thinks, "Oh, look at me, I'm helping out, but I don't really have it," right? Like, I'll give them this money now, but they have to pay me back so I can pay my car note or my bill or whatever. And that's when the whole thing falls apart. Don't do it. Don't. If you have the money, give it to them. If you have it, meaning you have it, that you literally have it, but also mentally that you're comfortable with this, right? Some people mentally feel like, for very, 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 very valid reasons, like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I just, I don't give money, and that's very valid. But if you want to, and that's something that you do comfortably, then just give it. Don't make a production about it. Don't, oh, I just here, let me, oh, I'm so glad I can help. Stop all of that. If you're going to give it discreetly, totally hidden, just there. And if you can do it anonymously, fine. This isn't about you. So if it's some sort of grandstanding, like, oh, look what a great entrepreneur I am, I'm so helpful, then you have serious problems with your self-esteem, with control issues, and you need to get serious focus on help, because this is not healthy. This is disrespectful to other people. So again, if it's something where you have the resources physically, mentally, and fiscally, then do it discreetly, and it's nothing. Don't ever speak of it. It's nothing. It was the least you could do. Just leave it at that. Sometimes there are people who will say, "Oh, I wouldn't be comfortable taking it," and then you could say some people, they have their own mental situation where they're not comfortable with that, and then maybe in some circumstances it may be appropriate to say something like, "Well, I got really fortunate right now. My candy store, is doing better than I thought. This is the least I can do, for you, and our friendship or whatever. If you ever want to think about it, you're such a great, about this issue, you can pay me back, by helping me with, you're such a good cook. You can help me prepare for some of the, things at the candy store. We're going to have an open store and an open house. I think you'd be great at helping with some of the baking for that. See, problem solved. They can pay you back in a way that they have talents and skills and qualifications, and then you can help them. That's awesome. But you have to be really healthy about this. If you start to feel like, oh, I'm in self-employment ecstasy, look at me, I'm going around fixing people, you have a mental health challenge, in addition to probably some other problems. It's, we talked about it. Look, this is life. Life is up and down, right? Things happen, they're great. Things happen, they're horrible. If you're an authentic person who invests in other people, investing meaning that you care about them, that you respect them, that you are honest and trustworthy for them, then that's priceless. And the same works for you. You never know what someone will be able to be of service in your life or how you'll be able to be of service in theirs. But you don't mix your passion and interest with people who don't have the same passion and interest. And so you're not going to hire someone to help them. You hire somebody because they're the best qualified. End of story. Does it happen sometimes that it happens to be your neighbor, your spouse, the person you went to second grade with? Yeah. Very rarely, but it does happen. All you have to do is just like you would any other good decision, right? We always talk about data. What are their skills? What are their interests? What are their qualifications? And if they're the best qualified, then it's a win-win. Then they really are excited to do it. Oh, it's my dream to do this. This is great. Awesome. And now that's great. When you don't hire that person because they're the most qualified, you're going to get nothing but pain. And often, and it hasn't happened, and I'm knock on wood, and I hope this doesn't, where I've lost a relationship. But I definitely have had this habit because it just comes to mind, right? Because it seems so simple. That the first thing you'll think is your skill and talent area, and somebody has an issue, you'll think, oh, this is great, I'll just have them come with me. No. And like I said, knock on wood, it hasn't cost me a relationship, but it definitely has been a learning experience, and I don't do this anymore. Don't do it. So if somebody's talking about something, they don't want you to fix it. They just want you to listen and be part of their community of caring, and you need to do that, right? And then as they continue down their own path in life, finding the thing that is their joy, then you really support that. And even though, just like they're not really into your candy store, but they'll show up at the grand opening and be there and be excited, yay, it's so great. Then when it's their thing and their time for them, then you need to go to that and be enthusiastic and woo, because you really are, because you care about them, right? That's life. And when the relationship and the foundations are built on that, then they'll weather whatever happens in your life and their life and the ups and the downs and all that, because they're built on those authentic pillars of trust and respect and integrity. And life is great. If you don't do this, you're going to really hurt yourself. Stop doing it. If you think about doing it, I still think about it sometimes. Somebody will say something, I'll think, oh, well, I sure need some help at whatever. Nope, stop. So when I think the thing, that's okay. We think all kind of things. The thing is, I don't say it, and I just leave it, and I leave it in my mind silent, and then I redirect back to how can I help with my friend, and I ask that, how can I help, or my family member, or my spouse, or whatever, how can I help, and they'll tell you, oh, I don't know right now. I just want you to listen. Great. Or later they'll follow up with you. Hey, is there anything, and then listen. Listen. I'll mention this, but it doesn't really apply to this topic. There are situations where people do pretend to be in your community of caring. They really aren't. And so they're really just interested in financial gain. Again, this isn't on our topic, and this hasn't happened to me, knock on wood. I don't hope it never would. But you would know, right? Because it's somebody that's not been in your community of caring, and they just sort of pop up and you're new, right? Hey, I really care about you. Really? What a coincidence! I see you have a candy store, and I need a business job. Really? And they'll very, usually really quickly, right? They'll ask for stuff. So it's totally different from your friend who doesn't even want this. Their friend wants your advice and your companionship and maybe you just sit there when they're sad or scared or crying or worried or whatever, or you to give them some pep talk or whatever. This person who's a financial fraudster, they immediately will pretty quickly, hey, wouldn't it be great if you invested in a new business? I have a new idea and all this kind of stuff, because or I'll go to your candy store and take over for your manager. I'll take care of the books, right? And then they might be somebody who goes in there and steals or whatever. So just pay attention. This isn't difficult. A real authentic, long-lasting relationship. Gee, you know what that is. It meets all that stuff, right? Long-lasting, been around, trust the person. You have examples of it. Okay, then that's easy. But don't fall for potentially somebody new coming into your life, especially even if maybe your community of caring is just you right now. Maybe there's not other people in it right now, which is totally happens to people all the time. That's totally healthy. But you can't think, oh, I'm lonely. And they came around and they seem like they really want to do this. Stop. Mm-mm, mm-mm. If you have a job opening, then you need to do like you do with any traditional job opening, whether it's an employee or a contractor. You need to, go to whatever you do, where you post it online and then you get resumes or however you do your thing, you do that, or you go look at a job site where people post their skills and you let them put bids on it or whatever. But do not go outside that system. It's going to do nothing but create heartache and emotional pain, and it's not worth it. And it's something so easily avoided on the part of the self-employment ecstasy member. So again, we're not going to hire people to help them. We hire people because they're the best qualified, because their skills, interests, and qualifications. And we have to just, be vigilant and make sure we're constantly using that test, making sure people are really in our community of caring. My happiness is their happiness is my happiness. And be just a little bit cautious, as anyone in life, when somebody sort of new pops up, right? Just sort of, hey, I can't believe it. We're like best friends, really? And it's also convenient, what a coincidence that I also want to have, a candy store. Okay, so just be careful. Just give it time, right? Some of my people in my community of caring, I have conversations with them, and the conversations will literally be stuff like, you remember, like, when we were, like 12? And and I'm not 12. I mean, obviously, I have to be at least 18 to have my show, but I mentioned earlier being in my 20s in the past, so, I'm a little older than that. But it's beautiful how relationships that are worthy and real, how they last. And how you can count on them, and so it's so easy. That's easy, right? And then you just have to be always remembering that your passion and your joy is yours, is your thing. And then seek out other relationships. Maybe you need to join a group, of people who are also entrepreneurs, right? Then you can sit around all the time and talk about it. Those people love that stuff, right? Maybe you need to go to the Chamber of Commerce. That's where your people might be. If you're into candy stores, join whatever association it is and go sit with those people. That's like a fantasy, because again, if you love bird watching, you need to be around other bird watchers. That's your thing. It's the same thing for you. If you're into self-employment, you need to be around other people who are into self-employment and or into whatever the underlying vehicles are, right? So when I want to be around other professional speakers, I love it because I get it, the same kind of speed and the same kind of energy. When I'm around other, lawyers, especially lawyers who had their own firm, I get it. Or have other types of consultancies or lobbyists or whatever, it's comfortable because we got a similar sort of mindset and we have similar interests. If I am with people in my community of caring, they may have a totally different life. They may live in a totally different part of the world and be totally different in so many ways, but they have a shared commitment to we care about each other, and they have something in their life that gives them meaning and definition. So they can go to that well independently and feel, yes, this is who I am. And I have my independent thing. And then together we have a wonderful relationship. But we never want to mix this up and mess it up. So we already fixed it, even though that word's not the greatest. But this show, I hope, was, one that helped you really think through this. Because again, it's the kind of small thing that destroys relationships. As a lawyer, I handled many of these sad situations where family, friends, people who had started businesses together, the whole thing falls apart because we start going down the path of this, thinking we're, quote, helping, and we're not. And there's nothing worse than thinking you're helping somebody and you're really hurting them and hurting yourself. And it's not who we are, right? So again, thank you for being part of this program, episode 222. Make sure you stop by CourtneyAnderson.com and make sure you leave a rating or review if you find our program on iTunes or Stitcher, or Spreaker, iHeartRadio, or anywhere it is in the world that you find it. That really helps. And I look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you.